Jerusalem translates to the city of peace, yet it remains history's bloodiest battlefield. This ancient limestone ridge has been leveled over 24 times by those who loved it too much. In these narrow alleys, time doesn't pass because it accumulates in layers of absolute conviction. This city has no river and no oil, yet Israel and Palestine both claim it as their eternal capital. You aren't just walking through a relic. You are navigating a security calculation dressed in the language of the sacred. Welcome to the most contested To understand why this limestone ridge has been leveled so many times, you must look at its location and its meaning. For thousands of years, Jerusalem sat at the crossroads of 3 continents, acting as a land bridge between Africa and Asia and Europe. Any empire that wanted to control the ancient world had to pass through this mountain range. From the Babylonians and the Persians to the Greeks and the Romans, everyone saw this city as a strategic prize. But the destruction was rarely just about military territory. Jerusalem is the only place on earth where a military victory was also seen as a victory of one God over another. When an army captured the city, they did not just take the land, but they tried to erase the history of the people who came before them. They leveled temples and built their own on top of the ruins to prove that their faith was more powerful. This created a cycle of holy revenge, where each new conqueror felt a divine mandate to bury the past. Because it was loved too much by too many different groups, no ruler could ever let it exist as it was. They had to destroy it to make it theirs, and this constant rebuilding is why the city today sits on 60 feet of its own debris and broken memories. The wide entrance, known as Damascus Gate, is more than just a gateway into the old city of Jerusalem. It has become one of the most politically sensitive gathering points in Jerusalem. Large stone steps lead down to the gate, creating an open space where people naturally gather throughout the day. Local residents often sit on the steps, meet friends, or pass through the entrance on their way to the markets inside the old city. Because thousands of people move through this area every day, the location quickly becomes crowded. That constant flow of people has also turned Damascus Gate into a focal point during periods of political tension. Demonstrations frequently begin here, and large crowds can gather within minutes. When that happens, security forces usually arrive quickly, blocking entrances and controlling movement around the gate. Over the years, many protests connected to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have started on these same stone steps. News cameras, police units, and large groups of demonstrators often appear here before spreading into the surrounding streets. Because of its location and the number of people who pass through it daily, Damascus Gate has become one of the most visible stages for political events in Jerusalem. The same entrance that serves as a busy access point to the old city can quickly turn into the center of a demonstration when tensions rise. Just steps away from the busy market streets, the path leads to a narrow lane known as the Via Dolorosa. The name means Way of Sorrow, and according to Christian tradition, this is the route where Jesus Christ carried the cross on the way to his crucifixion. The street passes through busy market alleys, where everyday life continues around the flow of pilgrims. Small shops sell souvenirs, scarves, spices, and religious items, while visitors move through the same narrow path, following the traditional stations of the cross. Groups often stop at certain points along the street, where guides read passages from the Gospel describing the events of that final walk. The path includes a series of 14 stations that mark important moments in the story of the crucifixion. Some of these locations are small chapels built into the walls, while others are marked by simple plaques or doorways along the street. Pilgrims pause at each stop to pray, sing quietly, or reflect before continuing along the route. What makes the experience unusual is how closely religious rituals share space with the everyday activity of the city. As groups of pilgrims walk slowly along the route, shop owners continue selling goods, delivery carts pass through the crowd, and sometimes the sound of a motor scooter echoes through the narrow alley. This ancient path of the Via Dolorosa eventually leads to a stone courtyard where morning light reaches the ground slowly. The light slides down the old limestone walls as the first visitors step inside the entrance of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You hear murmured prayers and the scrape of shoes on ancient stone, and the soft clicking of cameras from travelers who have waited years to stand in this place. Christians have been coming here for nearly 2,000 years because this church is believed to hold the site where Jesus was crucified, buried, and later discovered missing from the tomb. But one of the most curious details in this sacred space is not hidden deep in the church. It sits right above the entrance, where almost everyone eventually notices it. A small wooden ladder rests against a window ledge. It has remained in exactly the same position for more than 300 years. The reason sounds very simple at first glance. The church is shared by several Christian denominations, including Greek Orthodox, Armenian Apostolic, Roman Catholic, Coptic, Ethiopian, and Syriac communities. Centuries ago, they agreed on a delicate arrangement that governs every corner of the building. Even small changes require agreement between all of them. Moving the ladder would count as a change. So it stays exactly where someone left it in the 18th century. There is another unusual detail that visitors rarely expect. The main doors of the church are not opened by any Christian group. Instead, they are unlocked each morning by members of a local Muslim family who have kept the key for generations. The arrangement dates back hundreds of years when local leaders decided that giving the key to a neutral family could prevent disputes between the Christian communities. A short walk through the narrow stone streets leads to the base of the ancient retaining walls of Jerusalem, where one of the most recognizable sites in the city stands. Large limestone blocks rise high above the open prayer plaza, forming a structure that has stood here for nearly 2,000 years. The stones appear massive up close, some weighing several tons, carefully stacked in rows that have survived centuries of conflict, rebuilding, and change in the city around them. This wall is the last visible remnant of the expanded temple complex, built by Herod the Great in the 1st century before Christ. When Roman forces destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70, most of the temple structures disappeared. What remained were sections of the massive retaining walls that supported the platform above. Over time, the western side of that structure became the closest accessible point, where Jewish worshippers could pray facing the location where the temple once stood. Throughout the day, people approach the wall slowly, stepping across the wide stone plaza that opens in front of it. Some visitors place their hands directly on the cool limestone blocks. Others stand quietly with prayer books or small pieces of paper folded in their hands. Many of those papers carry personal prayers or messages. The narrow gaps between the ancient stones are filled with thousands of these small notes. Visitors gently press them into the cracks of the wall, leaving written prayers that remain there until they are periodically collected and placed in burial according to Jewish tradition. Directly above the western wall sits the open stone platform known as Temple Mount. From this height, the golden dome of the Rock rises above the pale stone courtyards and surrounding buildings, reflecting sunlight that can be seen from many hills around Jerusalem. For many visitors arriving in the city for the first time, this dome becomes the image they remember most. The building was completed in the 7th century and stands over a large rock formation that holds deep religious meaning. In Islamic tradition, this is the place from which the Prophet Muhammad began the night journey to heaven. The shrine is also located on the same hill where Jewish tradition places the ancient temples that once stood in Jerusalem. Because of these overlapping beliefs, the platform around the Dome of the Rock is considered one of the most sensitive religious sites anywhere in the world. Walking through the courtyard surrounding the shrine feels calm at first. The stone pavement stretches wide across the hilltop, and groups of visitors move slowly across the open space. But access to this area follows strict rules. Muslim worshippers enter freely for prayer, while visitors from other backgrounds are allowed only during certain hours and are not permitted to pray there. A short walk across the wide stone courtyard brings visitors to another building that holds enormous importance for millions of people around the world. The silver-grey dome of the Al-Aqsa Mosque rises above the southern side of the compound, marking one of the most important religious sites in Islam. For Muslims, this mosque is the third holiest place after Mecca and Medina. The name Al-Aqsa means the farthest mosque, a reference to the Islamic tradition that the Prophet Muhammad traveled here during the night journey before ascending to heaven. Because of this belief, generations of worshippers have traveled long distances to pray inside the mosque's large prayer hall. On ordinary days, visitors may see groups entering quietly through the surrounding courtyards. On Fridays, the atmosphere changes completely as thousands of people gather for weekly prayers. The area surrounding the mosque has also become one of the most sensitive locations in the city. Access to the compound is tightly controlled, and tensions can rise quickly when large numbers of people gather in a relatively small space. Demonstrations, political events, or sudden changes in security measures have sometimes turned this courtyard into the starting point of larger confrontations in Jerusalem. This entire hill has shaped the history of the city for thousands of years. While today it holds wide courtyards and ancient walls, the story that draws so much attention to this location is connected to something that disappeared here long ago. More than 2,500 years ago, this hilltop was believed to hold one of the most sacred objects in the ancient world. According to Jewish tradition, King Solomon built the first temple on this hill nearly 3,000 years ago. At the center of that temple stood a chamber called the Holy of Holies. It was a small inner room that only the high priest could enter, and only once each year during a sacred ceremony. Inside that chamber rested the Ark of the Covenant, a gold-covered chest that held the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. Then the temple was destroyed when Babylonian forces captured Jerusalem in the 6th century before Christ. During that moment of destruction, the Ark disappeared from history. No confirmed record has ever explained where it went. Some traditions suggest it was hidden before the invasion, while others believe it was taken away and lost somewhere far from the city. For centuries, historians, explorers, and archaeologists have searched for clues about its fate on this very hill. Along the eastern wall of the old city of Jerusalem stands a gate that has not opened for centuries. At first glance, it looks like one of the many entrances built into Jerusalem's ancient fortifications, but a closer look quickly reveals something unusual. The two arches of the Golden Gate are completely sealed with solid blocks of pale limestone. No doors, no passageway, just stone where an entrance once existed. The gate faces the Mount of Olives across the narrow stretch of the Kidron Valley. For centuries, this eastern entrance has been tied to powerful religious expectations. In Jewish tradition, it is believed that the Messiah will one day enter Jerusalem through this gate. Christian tradition also connects the Eastern Gate with biblical prophecy and the anticipated return of Christ. For many visitors, especially those familiar with the Bible, this quiet section of the city wall carries a sense of anticipation. The reason the gate is sealed goes back to the 16th century. When the Ottoman ruler Suleiman the Magnificent rebuilt Jerusalem's walls, he ordered this entrance permanently closed. Large blocks of stone were placed across the arches, turning the gate into part of the wall itself. Just outside the sealed arches lies a Muslim cemetery that spreads across the ground, facing the gate. Historians often note that the cemetery may have served as an additional barrier, since certain traditions discourage priests or holy figures from passing through burial grounds. Between the eastern wall of the old city of Jerusalem and the slopes of the Mount of Olives lies a narrow valley known as the Kidron Valley. From above, it appears as a long strip of land separating two of the most important hills in Jerusalem. The slopes are filled with ancient stone tombs carved directly into the rock. Some of them rise as large freestanding monuments that look more like small buildings than graves. These structures date back more than 2,000 years and belong to wealthy families from the period of the Second Temple. Among the most recognizable monuments is the Tomb of Absalom, a tall stone structure carved from a single block of rock. Nearby stand other tombs with carved columns, stairways, and decorative facades that have survived centuries of weather and erosion. The valley has long been connected with burial traditions. For generations, people chose this area because it lies directly between the Old City and the Mount of Olives, two places deeply connected to religious history. Even today, parts of the surrounding slopes remain covered with graves. Walking through the valley gives a clear sense of how closely the past sits beside the modern city. Above the cliffs stand the walls of Jerusalem, while the hillside cemeteries of the Mount of Olives stretch across the opposite ridge. At the foot of the Mount of Olives, just across the narrow Kidron Valley, a small, walled garden offers a quiet contrast to the busy streets of Jerusalem. This place is known as the Garden of Gethsemane. Inside the garden stand a group of ancient olive trees with thick, twisted trunks and wide branches that stretch over the stone paths. Their shapes are irregular and weathered, the bark folded and cracked from centuries of growth. Some of these trees are believed to be more than 2,000 years old, making them among the oldest living witnesses to the events described in the New Testament. According to Christian tradition, this is the place where Jesus Christ came to pray on the night before his arrest. After sharing the Last Supper with his disciples, he walked across the valley to this garden, seeking a quiet place away from the crowds. Today, the garden is carefully maintained with stone walkways, guiding visitors between the olive trees. Pilgrims often stop beneath the branches to read passages from the Bible or sit quietly for a few minutes while the surrounding city continues to move with the sounds of daily life. Rising above the garden, rows of pale stone tombs stretch across the hillside of the Mount of Olives, covering the slope in every direction. This hillside is one of the oldest active cemeteries on Earth, where Jewish burials have taken place for more than 3,000 years. Families have chosen this hill for generations, often traveling from other countries just to secure a burial place in this particular ground. The reason is rooted in an ancient belief that the final resurrection will start here. The Mount of Olives is believed to be the first place where the dead will rise. Because of that belief, burial space on this hillside is extremely valuable, and a single grave here can cost as much as $30,000. In most parts of the world, people pay high prices for homes with a good view, but on this hill, some families spend the same amount simply to secure a place in the cemetery. Walking through the site feels calm but never empty. From the upper part of the hill, the view opens across Jerusalem. The old city walls line the horizon, and the golden dome of the Rock reflects the afternoon sun, while the hillside remains covered with graves that have been waiting here for generations. Beneath the busy prayer plaza of the Western Wall, a narrow underground passage reveals a completely different side of Jerusalem. This network of corridors is known as the Western Wall tunnels, and it runs along the hidden sections of the same ancient wall that rises above ground. Most visitors only see a small portion of the Western Wall in the open plaza. The exposed section is roughly 200 feet long, but the original retaining wall, built during the time of Herod the Great, stretches much farther underground. The tunnels reveal hundreds of additional feet of massive stone blocks that normally remain hidden beneath the surrounding neighborhoods. Walking inside the tunnels feels very different from standing in the open plaza above. The passageways are narrow with low ceilings, and some of the blocks are enormous, weighing dozens of tons. As the path continues deeper underground, it becomes clear that modern homes and shops sit directly above these ancient corridors. Beneath the hillside of the city of David lies a narrow underground tunnel known as the Hezekiah Tunnel. This tunnel was carved through the rock over 2,700 years ago, during the reign of King Hezekiah. At that time, Jerusalem depended on the nearby Gihon spring for water. Because the spring lay outside the city walls, it was vulnerable to attack in case of a siege. To protect the water source, workers dug a tunnel through the rock to divert the water flow into the city. Today, visitors can actually walk through this ancient engineering feat. The tunnel stretches for about 1,700 feet, with water from the spring still flowing along the floor. Most people move slowly through the tunnel with small flashlights, stepping through water that reaches ankle or sometimes knee level. The passageway is narrow and rough, with curves carved directly into the rock. In some places, the ceilings are low, forcing visitors to slightly bend over as they move forward. The only sounds are the gurgling of water and the echoing footsteps along the stone walls. At the end of the tunnel, a passageway leads to a pool below, which once collected water within the ancient city. A short distance from the modern streets of Jerusalem lies a neighborhood where daily life follows traditions that have remained largely unchanged for generations. This area is known as Mea Shearim, one of the most well-known ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities in the city. Walking into the neighborhood feels noticeably different from other parts of Jerusalem. Most of the men wear long black coats, black hats, and white shirts. Many of them also have long side curls, known as payot, a traditional style worn by some religious Jewish groups. Women in the community usually dress modestly, often wearing long skirts and covering their hair with scarves or wigs. The streets themselves are narrow and lined with older apartment buildings. Posters written in Hebrew are attached to walls and fences, announcing community events or religious messages. Many signs ask visitors to respect the neighborhood's customs by dressing modestly and avoiding photography during religious holidays. Daily life is organized around prayer, study, and family routines. Yeshivas, or religious schools, fill many of the buildings where students spend long hours studying sacred texts. However, some extremist Jewish groups living here do not fully accept the modern state of Israel. Their belief is that a Jewish state should only be established after the arrival of the Messiah. Because of this religious view, certain communities prefer to keep their distance from the political system of the modern state. Not far from the historic districts of Jerusalem, the atmosphere changes completely inside Mahane Yehuda market. Instead of quiet prayer sites and ancient stone courtyards, this area is filled with the sounds of vendors calling out prices, metal shutters opening, and the constant movement of shoppers moving between crowded stalls. The market has been a center of daily life in Jerusalem for more than 100 years. Local farmers, bakers, and spice merchants arrive early in the morning to prepare their stands. Long rows of stalls sell fresh vegetables, olives, bread, cheese, nuts, and colorful piles of spices that fill the air with strong scents. What makes Mahane Yehuda unusual in a city known for religious divisions is the mix of people who come here. Jewish residents, Arab merchants, tourists, and students from nearby neighborhoods all move through the same narrow aisles. Conversations shift easily between Hebrew, Arabic, and English as customers stop to sample food or negotiate prices. Food often becomes the common language here. Vendors offer pieces of fresh fruit, warm pastries, or small tastes of local dishes to passing customers. In a city where religious and political tensions are often visible, the market provides a place where everyday routines feel more practical than ideological. The atmosphere here feels noticeably different from many other religious sites in Jerusalem. Instead of large crowds and narrow market streets, visitors walk through a small garden filled with trees, stone paths, and simple wooden benches. The site became known in the 19th century when some Protestant scholars suggested that this location might match the biblical description of the place where Jesus Christ was buried after the crucifixion. The tomb itself is carved into the rock face of a small hillside. Its entrance is low and simple, leading into a small burial chamber cut directly into the stone. Many Protestant Christians prefer visiting this location because of its quiet setting. The site feels less crowded and more open than other traditional pilgrimage locations inside the old city. The garden also includes a rocky hillside that some people believe resembles the description of Golgotha, the place of crucifixion mentioned in the Bible. Because of this interpretation, the location became especially popular among Protestant visitors from Europe and the United States during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The quiet neighborhood of Ein Karem sits among green hills, narrow roads, and stone houses that climb slowly up the slopes. The area has the atmosphere of a small countryside village. Houses built from pale Jerusalem stone stand close together along winding streets. Flowering plants grow along balconies and stairways, while small cafes and art galleries appear between residential homes. Many visitors are surprised by how calm the surroundings feel compared to the busy, historic districts of Jerusalem. Ein Karem also carries strong religious significance in Christian tradition. According to the Gospel of Luke, this village is believed to be the birthplace of John the Baptist, the preacher who later baptized Jesus Christ in the Jordan River. Because of this connection, several churches were built here over the centuries. One of the most recognizable is the Church of the Visitation, which stands on a hillside overlooking the village. The village has also become popular with artists and local residents who prefer the quieter environment outside the city center. Studios, small shops, and galleries are scattered along the streets, giving the area a relaxed atmosphere that contrasts with the more intense historical and political sites elsewhere in Jerusalem. The journey ends on a forested hillside at Yad Vashem, which serves as Israel's official memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. The museum building itself stretches through the hillside in a long concrete structure that cuts across the ridge. Visitors enter from one end and slowly move through a sequence of exhibition halls that present photographs, personal belongings, recorded testimonies, and historical documents from the period. The galleries follow the events of the Holocaust from the early rise of Nazi persecution to the liberation of concentration camps during the Second World War. Many of the displays focus on individual stories. Letters written by families, suitcases carried during forced deportations, and photographs taken before the war show the everyday lives of people who were later caught in the violence of the conflict. Audio recordings and video testimonies from survivors play throughout the museum, allowing visitors to hear first-hand accounts from those who lived through the events. Outside the main museum building, the memorial grounds continue through quiet pathways lined with trees. Several monuments stand throughout the complex, including the Hall of Names, where the identities of victims are preserved in an extensive archive. Nearby, the Children's Memorial honors the lives of the youngest victims through a dark hall illuminated by small points of light. Jerusalem remains a city where the past is never truly buried. It is a place of absolute conviction where every stone tells a story of survival and every alleyway holds a prayer. From the ancient tunnels beneath the ground to the golden domes reflecting the sun, this city endures because millions refuse to let it disappear. In this city of peace, history never ends because it simply keeps building upon itself. You have walked through a relic that is still very much alive.